More than 80 people in Iowa admitted they weren't citizens and voted anyway. How election officials made the catch and where the investigation stands. And an Iowa woman shares concerns about that audit, her worries about how and when it was done, and why she now fears for her husband's right to vote.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close Up.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. We have been closely following a press release last week from the Iowa Secretary of State's office. It said the office found more than 150 non-citizens have voted in past elections or registered to vote in Iowa. Now, that audit also found that more than 2,000 voters whose citizenship status is unclear. And there's been a lot of questions about how this audit was conducted, what it exactly found, and why this information was announced so close to Election Day. We've been digging into all of this to get the facts for you. Iowa's Secretary of State, Paul Pate, says his office is constantly checking that all Iowa voters are actually eligible to vote.
County auditors constantly provide us new data, new people registering, people who've moved, people might have died. So it's never stopping. And when we get additional lists, sources, we will run and cross-check those.
A recent check with the Iowa Department of Transportation found that 87 people told the DOT they are not U.S. citizens, but did vote in a past election. The audit also found that 67 people who are not citizens have wrongfully registered to vote.
We've reached out to the Department of Public Safety and the Attorney General's office and said this needs to be investigated and these individuals shouldn't be voting. And furthermore, I think they might have committed a Class D felony, which is 5 years in prison, if that's the case.
The audit also found there are roughly 2,000 people who have voted or registered to vote, but their citizenship status is unclear.
When they got their driver's license, they indicated they were not a U.S. citizen. But there's a window for many of us. When you get a driver's license, you don't renew it, for 4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, and they may have become a citizen in that window. But to be safe about it, we have to confirm, are you a citizen or not?
Pate says if those people show up to vote, they'll get a provisional ballot. That will be reviewed before it's counted.
We are still going to challenge those individuals if they show up at the voting place this election and have them vote provisional. They're not going to get a free ride to get the vote while the investigation is going. We will hold on to that and try to sort it out before their vote goes into the ballot box.
Pate's office also tells KCCI that if the voters in question provide proof of citizenship, they can cast a ballot as normal.
This coming 2 weeks before the election makes it more difficult to ensure that his vote is going to get counted. I know that's his main concern.
Central Iowa voter Jill Fisher says her husband became a citizen 6 years ago.
At first it didn't really hit home because obviously it makes sense that we don't want non-citizens voting. And honestly, my husband became a citizen in 2018. Which was several years ago. He's been voting in several elections, every election since then.
Then Fisher says concern set in.
And then it kind of occurred to me a little bit later on, like, hey, wait a minute. He did get his driver's license way before he became a citizen, and that was back in 2010. So if those are the records that they're basing this off of, we don't go to the DOT often enough to know, do you fill out that form every time you renew? So we don't know if there's updated records on that.
She says she still has questions.
Why, if he's a legal citizen and has for 6 years been able to vote with full rights of a citizen, why now all of a sudden is it provisional? And why is the onus on him to prove his citizenship? And why isn't the Secretary of State's office reaching out to these people, contacting them, and trying to solve this problem now?
So does Joe Henry with the League of United Latin American Citizens.
This is politically motivated. This is causing a chilling effect. It's going to be a damper on those 2022, and who knows who else.
Who wants the Secretary of State to take action before the election.
All we're saying is do your job. Do the work that you're supposed to be doing. Verify this before the election. Don't hold these 2022 people out there and tell them you're just going to allow them to do provisional ballot and you're not going to do the homework. Call them. Ask for their information. Spend the time. You have the resources of the state of Iowa to do this job.
Henry says he's concerned this creates extra barriers for Iowa's Latino community.
It's always pointed to our community, and it's to gin up the hate and also to cause confusion with poll watchers too. Poll watchers are now going to be on the alert. They're going to be concerned. They're going to be looking at these names. And when they look at these names, there's more than one Gonzalez, there's more than one Gomez, there's more than one Jose Gonzalez. So when these names pop up, who knows how many Jose's will be triggered on this, who will be given a provisional ballot. So that's why we need to know who is on this list.
And we asked the Iowa Secretary of State's office for the date and the time of when they received this information from the DOT, when they did the audit, and how that audit was done. In response, a spokesperson from Pate's office says they noticed that other states use lists from their departments of transportation to cross-check for eligibility, and they say that led the Iowa Secretary of State's office to check their voter database against the DOT's list of non-citizens. A spokesperson told KCCI, quote, "On a regular basis, we conduct similar cross-referencing of lists with other governmental agencies, and we receive information from county auditors regularly. This is the first time we have received this list from the Iowa DOT, but it will be a part of our ongoing processes moving forward." And we are also working to get the list of the names of the potential non-citizens from the Iowa Secretary of State's office. Well, turning now to the races on the ballot here in Iowa, the fight for Iowa's 1st district seat is one of the most competitive in the country. Last Monday, the Democratic and Republican candidates answered questions in their only televised debate hosted by Iowa PBS. Republican incumbent Marionette Miller Meeks is facing Democratic challenger Christina Bohannon. Both were asked about their plans on immigration.
If we have asylum seekers, that those are legitimate asylum seekers, and we need a process for that. We need a process that, is timely. I mean, one of the problems right now is it just takes forever.
Do we risk turning away people who are truly here because their life is in danger, there is violence in their communities? And I think that, yes, and putting administrative law judges at the border so there can be a more immediate asylum hearing.
The two also sparred on issues like abortion and the economy. Now, Iowa's 3rd district race is also hotly contested. Republican incumbent Zach Nunn faces Democrat Lenon Beckham.
Washington could use a little bit more of Iowa.
Republican Representative Zach Nunn has served one term in Congress.
Most Iowans, like our communities here, want to see results that help their family, help their community, help their family farm. Those are the kind of things that we've prioritized in our first year, and we've been able to have some real success.
In 2022, Nunn narrowly defeated Iowa's only Democrat on Capitol Hill, flipping the 3rd district seat from blue to red. KCCI political analyst Dennis Goldford predicts another competitive race as Nunn seeks re-election.
Typically, we don't really know if someone in his first term is there as a fluke. I mean, Nunn upset in a very close race by about 2,100 votes Cindy Axne before. Was that a fluke, or does that show some real staying power? So that first re-election race, which is what Nunn is facing right now, is always a tough one.
I'm an Iowan born and raised. I grew up in a rural community.
Nunn faces Democratic challenger Lenon Beckham.
I've dedicated my life to giving back. 8 years in the military, a deployment to Afghanistan, 10 years working at USDA. I'm ready right now to serve Iowans in the 3rd district.
Iowa's 3rd district includes Polk County, the largest county in the state with a large base of registered Democrats. But Goldford says there are slightly more registered Republicans in the district, spread across the other 20 more rural counties. He says that gives Nunn a slight advantage, but still puts pressure on both candidates to get voters to the polls.
Will Polk County turn out sufficiently for Democrats to help Beckham defeat Nunn, or will that strength he has in more rural areas and probably also in Dallas County as well, will that see him through?
Amanda Rooker, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader. Still to come on Close Up, high turnout for early voting, how the Postal Service is preparing to deliver all mail-in ballots safely. But first, sitting down with the candidates in Iowa's 3rd district race, we talked to both men about why they're running and where they stand on key issues. Welcome back to Close Up. We're taking a closer look at the race to represent Iowa's 3rd District in Congress. The district covers southwest and central Iowa. It includes Des Moines, West Des Moines, Winterset, Osceola, and Ottumwa. I sat down with Democrat Lennon Bacom, who's hoping to flip this 3rd District seat from red to blue. Democrat Lennon Bacom introducing himself to Iowans.
I enlisted in the Iowa Army National Guard. I served for 8 years, including a deployment to Afghanistan, and I served again when I came home. 10 years working at the U.S. Department of Agriculture with former Governor Tom Vilsack. And the lessons I learned through the course of my life and the experiences that I have, people can clearly see and they know that I'm ready to serve the 3rd District right now in Congress.
Bacom's campaigning heavily on reproductive rights.
I think the first thing that we need to do as a country is pass the Women's Health Protection Act.
He wants a federal law protecting abortion access from most state bans and restrictions.
Restoring Roe v. Wade is what the Women's Health Protection Act will do, and that's the kind of policy that I'll support when I get to Congress.
Do you think that there should be, at any point of pregnancy, a limit on, when abortion is allowed?
I think the question here, and this is key, the question is, who gets to make this decision? Because right now, Zach Nunn and his colleagues have made the decision on if, when, and how a woman can start a family. The decision on this is with a woman, her family, and her doctors, period. It's not a place for Zach Nunn to insert himself into the doctor's office to tell women what to do with their bodies. This is a deeply personal issue, and women should have their rights returned, and that they should have the rights to make decisions about their own health care, period.
And as Iowans look for relief from high prices,
we have to find a way to raise and grow the things we eat on our table closer to home.
Bacom says he'd take his work at the USDA to Congress to help lower food costs in Iowa.
So we can actually get things regionally, and so we don't have to rely on long supply chains, that we can get the stuff that we want a little bit closer here. We can increase competition because there are more folks in the business of growing the things we eat.
He's also concerned about the House proposal for the next 5-year farm bill. Bacom says it shortchanges Iowa farmers.
$27.5 billion more for commodity programs that primarily benefit the southern crops: cotton, rice, peanuts, at the expense of corn and soybeans. The commodity programs only have a few 100,000 farmers who are eligible for them, and the top 10% get 75% of the funds. It is a program that significantly supports the biggest of the big.
He says he wants Congress to pass a new farm bill, but he wants more funding for conservation.
When we look at that, we look at conservation programs where every single farmer is eligible. 1.7 million operations are eligible for those, and that the fact that the nutrition programs, that millions of people rely on those, there has to be a balance, and they have to find a way to compromise here, which has always been done.
On immigration,
securing the border is really, really important here. There's no question we have to do that.
Bacom says he supports the bipartisan border bill that was blocked by Senate Republicans in February.
This would have added more agents at the border. It would have deployed smart technology to identify fentanyl and other drugs. And most importantly, it would have forced the president to shut down the border when it became overwhelmed. Was it perfect? No, absolutely not. But that's a starting point at which we can at least start securing the border and then move into the conversation about how we actually reform immigration. Securing the border is critically important because it is a national security issue and an economic security issue. And I believe this deeply because, well, I'm a veteran. I served in Afghanistan in 2004. And me, along with 40 other soldiers, were the full-time unit that occupied my little base. And in that time, we knew every day who was coming on and off that base. And we need to know that for our country as well, who is coming in and out of our country. And so we need to secure the border. This is personal for me. I understand it. I believe in it. We must get it done.
Bacom's running in Iowa's 3rd District, which includes Polk County, the largest county in the state, with a large base of registered Democrats. But the district has slightly more registered Republicans. What would be your message to some Iowans who may disagree with you politically in some of those more rural counties about why they should vote for you?
I'm an Iowan born and raised. I grew up in a rural community. I've done the same things that a lot of kids from rural towns have done. In addition to that, I've been to every single county in the 3rd district. The 3rd district has Polk County, the most populated county in the state. It has Adams County, the least populated county in the state. I've been to Adams County 3 times. I'm showing up everywhere to make sure that Iowans know that I will be a representative for everyone in this district, and I think they appreciate that.
When we come back, we talk with Nunn's opponent. Then we talk with Bacaum's opponent, Republican Zach Nunn, why he says he's a better fit for Iowa's 3rd district. Welcome back to Close Up. I sat down with both candidates running in Iowa's 3rd district race, one of the most competitive races in the country. Republican Zach Nunn won the seat in 2022 by roughly 2,000 votes. He's hoping to keep his seat for another 2 years.
Republican incumbent Zach Nunn touting his work during his first term in Congress.
I think most Iowans, like our communities here, want to see results that help their family, help their community, help their family farm. Those are the kind of things that we've prioritized in our first year, and we've been able to have some real success. Rural housing, helping families leave, veterans issues, all things that have been signed into law by the president. This is what we want to carry forward in the next 2 years, and I think it's really important as we look forward that there's a lot of good practices that we do here in Iowa that I want to see carried out in Washington, D.C.
In his bid for re-election, he's campaigning heavily on the economy.
You've got to cut the federal spending. There are too many departments and agencies spending way too much money. One of the things that I've done in Congress is already cut over 50 federal agencies and their ability to raise funds on their own, which should tell us right now there's too many federal agencies in Washington, D.C. trying to control people's lives. The second part is it can't just be about cut. You have to be able to grow the economy. I think one of the best ways to grow the economy is to make sure Iowans have their tax dollars and make investments in their community. That's what's going to help us grow, but it's also going to be what pays down our national debt.
On abortion,
I think good people can agree and disagree on the issue of abortion. So let me be clear where I stand. First, I'm pro-life. I support exceptions. I oppose a federal abortion ban. I've supported bipartisan legislation for IVF to help a family start a family. It can cost a family tens of thousands of dollars, and we want to be able to provide on-ramps for folks in that path. I also want to make sure that we can have over-the-counter birth control for women.
And Nunn also touts his work on a House proposal for a new 5-year farm bill.
We've worked across the aisle to make sure that we have priorities for things like crop insurance, new and beginning farmers, access to hard infrastructure like broadband and market to road bridges.
But work on that bill has stalled.
Here's where the challenge is. Right now, we've got a ready to go bill in the House. In the Senate, they haven't even written down what their priorities are. Now, I have faith that we can work on this together. And in the weeks ahead, we have the opportunity to pass a comprehensive farm bill. Once in a 5-year means that we are planning strategically. It's probably one of the best things we do in Congress to look out into the future, but it's also something that's absolutely essential for farmers, for rural communities, and for this country. Because at the end of the day, food security is our national security, and we've got to get this right.
On education, Nunn supports more federal investment in trade schools.
There's a great role for the federal government to be able to support our apprenticeship and trade school programs, as well as efforts we've made with our nursing programs and targeted loan forgiveness for folks who want to go and teach in rural Iowa or be a doctor at a county hospital.
Do you support eliminating the Department of Education?
No, but I do think we need to have real reform here. Look, the Department of Ed continues to have folks work remote, is over budget, is over bloated. I think that we have really good examples of what works here in Iowa for a diversity of education programs that are responsible locally, that are accountable to taxpayers, and that have good recommendations.
Nunn's also campaigning on border security.
What steps would you take if you were reelected to secure the U.S. southern border?
So this is the number one issue I hear about right now. There are 3 things we can do immediately. One, we can reinstate Remain in Mexico, something the president could do today with the stroke of a pen. We could make sure that we end this catch and release. And then we can do the important things like finish the security and border wall and make sure that we pass H.R. 2, one of the first bills that I led while in Congress just in my first weeks.
There has not been comprehensive immigration reform at the congressional level since 1996. And a lot of Iowans see the House did put forward H.R. 2, but it's stopped. It hasn't been passed in the Senate. Democrats declared that bill dead on arrival in the Senate. On the Senate side, Senate Republicans, with the votes of a handful of Democrats as well, blocked that bipartisan border bill back in February. When Iowans see 2 pieces of legislation being stopped back and forth between different political parties, they see it as a political game, something that Republicans and Democrats aren't willing to compromise on to find comprehensive reform. How do you assure Iowans that you're not seeing this as a political issue, that you're willing to work across the aisle to actually get comprehensive reform done?
Look, as a military guy who helped run operations to help secure our border while serving in the Iowa National Guard, there could be nothing more important to me than helping protect our country. I'll also highlight that we've passed appropriations budgets to help Customs and Border Patrol really enforce the technology that is needed to protect our southern border. But when I went down there, I saw firsthand Border Patrol agents that were underpaid, understaffed, and overwhelmed. We have an administration that wants to cycle through as many illegal migrants within 72 hours, while people in foreign countries who want to come here legally, who we desperately need, are given no on-ramp to come in. So this is a catastrophic failure of the administration to fix a broken immigration policy that largely falls on the administration for execution.
And in a seat that's flipped back and forth between red and blue representation, Nunn's pitching himself as bipartisan.
It's been a real privilege to be part of this community for so long. I'm honored to have 750,000 bosses who are Republicans, who are independents, and who are Democrats. It's one of the reasons not only am I the top 10 most bipartisan legislator, it's because I have been able to lead, with my military background, a focus on delivering results for the people who elected me.
Still to come on Close Up, keeping election mail safe and secure, the preparation from the Postal Service to handle all mail-in ballots. A record number of Americans are casting their votes early, and that includes people voting by mail. In a virtual event last week, the United States Postal Service shared how they're preparing to deliver all election-related mail on time and securely.
We've made significant investments in enhancing the Postal Service's delivery security in its network, including installation of new high-security collection boxes, electronic locks, a number of measures that help ensure the security of all mail, including ballots and other election mail.
The Postal Service says in the 2020 general election and the 2022 midterms, more than 99% of mailed ballots were delivered to election officials within 7 days. And the Postal Inspection Service says it's working closely with law enforcement agencies at every level of government to secure all election mail. Well, thanks for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. We'll see you back here next Sunday. Have a great day.